business came up in Scariff. Richard, who went to work in Scariff, joined the local community steering group, and Joe, who's got his hand wiping the table there, Joe joined the steering committee with Richard, and different things began to happen in Scariff, and Joe and Brian just started to be part of everything that went on. They had previously attended the workshop in Ennis. And the co-op one day said, you know, we've got a coffee shop and we'd like somebody to rent the coffee shop. The rent will be cheap. There won't be a huge income out of it, but we're really looking for somebody to run it. And Joe and Brian said, well, look, we'll have a go at it. They both had part-time jobs at this stage. So I'm probably moving on a year or two after they'd moved from the workshop. Both had got part-time jobs, but they still had part-time with not a lot to do. So they began to job share, if you like, and run the coffee shop. And it was an interesting experience because coming from our services and being supported by us, they still saw that the Brothers of Charity would tell them what to do, and if they were going to have this business, that we'd sort of show them how to do it. And around this time as well, Professor Kelly Johnson from Australia, who is one of the world leaders in inclusive research, she happened to come to Trinity College in Dublin on a Marie Curie scholarship and fellowship. And they contacted us from Trinity and they said, look, we hear you doing things differently. Would you like Kelly to go and work with you in County Clare and perhaps show people with disability how to do their own research? And of course, we were delighted at this chance. Kelly came down, she met everyone, she went around, I'd say she spent weeks touring Clare, meeting all the different people we supported wherever they were at. And when she met Joe, Joe said, look, I'd really like to do some research on the coffee shop. And Kelly went on then to support them to publish their research. So I have here with me Joe and Brian and Joe's coffee shop. And Joe says, I'm not going to go into much detail, but just to give you an idea, Joe said, when Kelly met him, he said, I'd really like to do some research on the coffee shop. He said, because I'd like to see how the community feel about it, what does it do well, and what could it do better. And he said, the other thing is, he said, I worked for years in a workshop, because he'd worked in a workshop before he even came to Clare, to the Brothers. And he said, it wasn't a great experience. And he said, I'd like other people to know about how people with disability can run their own business. But the beginning was, you know, not that easy. As in Brian's words, talking about it, he said, we started off with a cash box. He said, then with help, I got a grant to buy a till that was easy to see. I found it hard to manage the till and stuff like that. Lots of things I hadn't done before. Money and the working of it was hard. Print on the till was too small. I contacted the serviceman in Ennis myself, and he came out. He printed up bigger stickers. Writing the checks was hard because I never done it before. I got people in the shop to spell out the words for me. So you begin to see how moving from, previously we'd always thought we would train people in the workshop and then we'd have it all sorted and people would go out and get jobs. And of course that never happened. So suddenly people are out running their own business, you know, having to make do. I remember Joe and Brian told me one day they were short. Brian couldn't come in one afternoon. So Joe was working that morning and he said, we have a problem this afternoon, we've nobody to run the coffee shop. And one of the people in the shop said, I'll volunteer, I'll run the shop this afternoon. So, as Joe says in the book, we got good volunteers. I always say one thing leads to another. I suppose it's like that in all our lives, on our life's journey, something happens, then something else happens, and that's how our life develops and grows. Another thing that happened was that Brian said, we went to Galway to meet a man from Costa Rica who grows his own coffee. He told us about fair trade and he showed us some of his coffee. After we met him, we decided to sell fair trade. So it goes on then, and the book later, in this, they interview different people who are involved in the coffee shop, apart from people in the community who are benefiting from coming in every day. They said that they began to have fundraising nights. And then it goes on to talk about the musical nights they had. And then it talks about a local man who was injured, and they ran a fundraising night for him. So you begin to see what came out of two guys setting up a business. As it happens, after a while, Brian decided he got full-time employment at the Mart. He said he was fed up with the coffee shop, and Joe was happy to run it himself. Interestingly enough, Joe got another job eventually, and he decided to give up the coffee shop. And they had a friend who, in the community, who said, look, I'll take over the coffee shop. So it's been, you know, the way a lot of things do. A lot of us, we move on from one thing to another. If you compare that back to people in a workshop, it's often happened to me in my career. You walk in 5 years later, people are still sitting at the same place doing the same work.